and prove themselves, that President would have made the initiative to put this money to advisory council. So I'd like to recommend this to the motioning party.
If you do accept or decline that modification.
Okay,
Yeah, it's Nana. Thank you, Speaker Curley, again for giving me this time. I do appreciate Delegate Chair Jesus's recommendation. I would want it with the conditions that they're not just left as open positions, but they are very much specific. And it should be written in there, program and project specialist for the Youth Advisory Council. And so I would like to make that specification in that amendment. In addition to whatever funds we also establish in terms of fringe benefits, as well as travel and meeting stipend, totaling the amount of $75,000. Thank you.
Vice Chair Simonson, so did you, for the clarification, did you accept or decline that modification request?
I would like to see the actual modification written out. In addition, I believe Delegate Charles Newton as well as Rick Nez offered their LDA positions, so perhaps those funds could go in other line items of the Youth Advisory Council.
Thank you, Vice Chair Simonson. I know it was suggested by Honorable Jesus, if you could give us the specific line items or business unit numbers that you were referring to, so we can have Ms. Tapahi create that language, and she will need a few minutes to do that.
Yeah, it is. The rest of them all stay, yeah. That's the one I'm moving. That's how it was approved. Yeah, yeah. Okay, but I think they're waiting on me, so. You want to go ahead and do that then? Yes. Let's go.
Honorable Vice Chair Simonson and Honorable Jesus, if we can get that information or email to our legal counsel so we can get that correct language here on the board for you. All right, colleagues, we are doing that modification here with our legal counsel, and it will need approximately 10 to 15 minutes. So if we can recess, or if you need to get something to eat, stand, walk, if that is okay with anybody. Point of order raised by Honorable James.
Speaker, thank you. Members of the Naa'bik'iyati Committee, I raise this point of order in regards to a motion being on the floor. So we do have a motion on the floor. If whoever the next speaker is, if they could ask the motioning parties to withdraw their amendment and come back to it. Again, my second point of order is going to be, we need to hear from Office of President and Vice President. There is nobody from there to tell us what their plan is, and we're just juggling and moving funds around from them. So we need to hear what is the plan from that office. Earlier you indicated that there was a notice that was sent to them. If they haven't shown up, I guess youth council is not important to them. And so we need to make sure that it's part of their plan. So I raise those 2 point of orders. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable James. I'm going to recognize that point of order. So, colleagues, just a recap, we did have a request from Chair Jesus for a modification to the amendment, and Vice Chair Simonson did accept that modification. So our attorneys are here needing additional time to update the board of that modified amendment. So if I go to another colleague without them knowing what the modification of the amendment is, then they wouldn't know what to debate. So I have to get that modification first, and we can update on the board, and then we can move on to Honorable Johnson on that modified amendment number 3. But we do, in regards to the question for the Youth Council from OPVP, we do have Mr. Arbin Mitchell that is on Zoom with us. So maybe while we're waiting for that modification on the amendment, we can hear from OPVP on the Youth Council. And just a reminder, colleagues, if you're having side conversations outside from being on the floor, please keep it down, and so we can try to have our legal counsel here concentrate and finish that amendment number 3. Mr. Mitchell, we're going to hear from Mr. Mitchell regarding the Youth Council budget. So while they're preparing for the amendment, if more time is needed to draft that amendment, then we can entertain a recess. Mr. Mitchell, if you're here with us online. Mr. Arbin Mitchell, if you're online with us, you can press *6 or unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Mitchell, you are here on the floor, and there were numerous questions in regards to the Youth Council of who is overseeing the program and what was the reasoning for just expending 10% of the budget this fiscal year, and also what are some of the future priorities for the Youth Council. I believe there are some of the general questions that were asked here on the floor. We are on amendment number 3 to allocate additional $75,000 to the Youth Council. So many of our colleagues here have questioned where to have some of these basic questions answered before we move forward. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you again. For the record, my name is Arbin Mitchell, Office of President, Vice President. Back to the question a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, when I was before NABI, that was one of the questions. Information on the Youth Council. So during that time, I stated that a plan of operation went through the 164B. That was right before the new administration came in. So we took it over to legislative and for a 164A to put to amend the plan of operation. There was already a plan of operation in place. This was just to amend the plan of operation. So that's where we're at on the plan. Now comes the other question, the expenditure. Also the other question on the activities of the youth council. Also during that time, I stated that the membership for the youth council information was sent out for nomination to the youth council, but I heard that we didn't get very many or none at all for membership, but it's still out there. We're still going to request for membership. That's the reason why the expenditure level is low. I believe I heard 10%. Although the other one is Department of the Net Youth, which I also stated at the Naa'bi meeting during our budget deliberation. Office of the Net Youth is also providing administrative oversight to the youth council. Although I just heard the bits of the discussion here, the money being transferred from Office of Miss Navajo to youth. Although it's a case, I know it's both of them are important. Yeah, Office of Miss Navajo. Although and the although take care of it, the next they look up to Miss Navajo. On the other side, the youth council. So their kids are looking up to participate in any activities that is tied with the youth council. So I start to respond. It is very important. It is very important. Could modify it. I would object against modification using the three vacant position from OPVP. The modification to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for reviewing the youth council. Colleagues, there was Vice Chair Simonson did accept modification of her amendment, and we do have our Office of Legal Counsel, two of our attorneys who are still working on that modification of amendment number 3. Thank you, colleagues of the Naa'bik'iyati Committee. We will do a roll call to reconvene and exit out of recess. Colleagues, if you are on the council floor, please press your roll call button so we can reconvene. Honorable applause present. Honorable Azeret. Honorable Chair Eugenia Charles Newton. Honorable Damon. Honorable Simpson. Honorable Chair Eugenia Charles Newton is present. Honorable Azeret. Honorable Damon. Honorable Simpson. And for the record, colleagues, we do have 2 excused absences. Honorable Arviso, Honorable Daniels. Colleagues, we do have 19 council delegates present, and we will exit out of recess at 5:22 p.m. Colleagues, we did have our Office of Legal Counsel do that modification to Amendment number 3, and we will have Ms. Cook read that modification to the record.
Okay, amendment number 3 to legislation number 0214-23. Make the amendments to the comprehensive budget legislation as follows. Business unit number 103001, Office of the President and Vice President, to business unit number 103021, Navajo Advisory Youth Council. From line item 2110 personnel, 90,000 to, from 2110 personnel, 90,000, from 2900 fringe benefits, 7,451 to 2,100 personnel, 43,556, 2,900 fringe benefits, $18,895, 3,000 travel, 10,000, 3,500 meeting expenses, 5,000, 5,000 account number lease rental, 10,000, 6,500 contractual services to 10,000. The total deductions from 103001 is 97,451 to total additions to business unit number 103021, 97,451. The Office of Management and Budget shall work with the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare, revise, and correct exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the committee's final approved amended allocations in the detailed budget book and other exhibits. Renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this act and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendments. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Believe the modification to amendment number 3 is on the board. I'm going to concur first with the motioning party to the amendment. Vice Chair Simonson, is the language correct on the board?
Let's go down. Hi, good evening, Nana. Speaker Curley, thank you for the time. And I appreciate Delegate Jesus offering this amendment and this other way that we could address this. And so I just want to speak on two things. One, if President Mr. Boo Nygren is listening here, an behinzi kwato e yanle de nanau. Yides cargo and saha case the no e besins e benache e ko na halchene and tilkage ke no sele e code la hashin so na hata donanish and saha case bandiliel hala e di be in na banate ado yesiten zindole net nije jo eben ye eat o koho a hwe hot up sad be hatot zi Adoshin adobik e hadajit e tadole qua oyanshich and chon atinde hot a holjishinle a koho qua beso la njin nella e kwaje ishin e benye a ko ade oki e digi beso chidil intashno a kodo Brenda Jesus kodo e ya hashin tsogo beso ikidil ni Ede, and I'm giving credit where it's due. E kwa hato not a kwa peso ikidil ni tisha no. Ako e adogi haitzoigi e koje budget ilianle. Aro kodo Health Education Human Service Committee. Le 23rd Navajo Nation Council ata ita e yananish atan dasiliala. Pahanolala Hes Committee, Oversight Committee, Nohlindolil, to the Youth Advisory Council. Jo Eshi an hidet Hashin Sogo Edi, Vendil Nishton Hiya that Banet Idolil Binye, Banahuit Adolil Binye. Jo Hotel be Sabe Danahuidit Ahi Basil Sosenle. Oko Eshi be Innocendolil.
Point of order raised by Honorable James.
Speaker, if we could keep the meeting in order. I know you did ask a question to concur to the language. Right now, it's starting to sound like a presentation of the amendment. So if we can keep the meeting in order and just the concurrence of the language that's on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable James. I'm going to recognize that point of order. Vice Chair Simonson, the language on the board, if you do concur. Vice Chair Simonson concurs. The second motion was by Honorable Vice Chair Slater.
How much time do I have? I concur, thank you.
Seconding party does concur. Colleagues, so we do have a modification of amendment number 3 on the board. I'm going to turn the floor back over to Vice Chair Simonson, and then we will follow by questions or comments to amendment number 3.
Okay, Speaker Curley, can you say that again one more time?
Vice Chair Simonson, you can present your modified amendment number 3.
Okay, so the modified budget now looks like this. We are taking from BU number 103001, Office of the Vice President, and he had funds in there for personnel as well as fringe benefits. And that'll then transfer over to BU number 103021. And the way that's divvied up is personnel, fringe benefits, and I believe this is emailed out to everybody. But do you need me to state the dollar amounts? Or, okay, so we're staying with the personnel dollar amount of 43,556, and that we calculated the fringe benefits at 18,895, and then travel at 10,000, meeting expense at 5, lease rental at 10, and then contractual service at 10, and that all equals back to 97,451, and that is the amendment that we have made. And just for clarification, the 75,000 will stay with Office of Miss Navajo Nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Simonson, to the motioning of amendment number 3. Colleagues, I will return the floor over to comments and questions on amendment number 3. Vice Chair Johnson. Point of order raised by Honorable James.
Thank you, Speaker. I raised this point of order to get a clarification on which funding we are following. We do have page 4 of 12, line 10, the personal lat savings account, and then the listing goes with it. And so we just now received this one here while we were on recess. And so right now I need a clarification on which numbers are we working with. Is it the numbers that is on the legislation, or is it this one that we received during recess? Because there are other business unit numbers, object codes that have different numbers. And so if we're going by this and it's not on this legislation, we are totally out of order. And so I'd like to get that clarification on which one is it that we're following. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable James, and recognize that point of order. First, I'm going to have Honorable Parrish. That I believe that was through the actions of Budget and Finance. This is in regards to Exhibit G1, if I'm not mistaken, that you're holding up, G1. And then followed, I will give the floor over to Ms. Tapahi as well to give further clarification. Honorable Parrish, sponsor.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Curley, and thank you to Chair Vince James, who raises the point of order today. The Exhibit G1 that was passed out during recess was just conferred by the Office of Management and Budget, and the date is on the bottom, so it says September 5th, 2023. And these were modifications that the Budget and Finance Committee made in the committee. So in the committee report, at the bottom of the report, it directs the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of Legislative Counsel, and the Office of Legislative Services to update the exhibits as they go to Naa'bik'iyati. This exhibit was just conferred today. So while everybody was in the midst of NABI, this document was also just released from Office of Management and Budget. So the amendments that were passed in Budget and Finance are reflected in the budget book itself. The Office of Management and Budget made those modifications, and it's reflected in the big budget book. However, this executive summary of the Navajo Nation fiscal 2024 personal lapse fund allocations in G1, that's the executive report that was updated as an exhibit. However, to the legislation and the adoption of the budget book itself reflects the amendments in Budget and Finance. Any clarification on the exhibit that was just passed out? So the numbers in G1 are already applied to the big budget book. This was just released by the Office of Management and Budget, and also with coordination with Office of Legal Counsel. I know we don't have Miss Dana Bobroff, but we do have Miss Lorraine Tapahi, who works with Budget and Finance on the legislation, also on the amendments. So Ms. Tapahi is juggling what the amendments that were passed in Budget and Finance, and also what is being discussed today and here in Naa'bik'iyati. So that's the point, I guess, my response to the exhibit that was presented to Naa'bik'iyati. Committee Speaker Curley.
Thank you, Honorable Parrish. I'm going to give some time to Office of Legal Counsel as well to give further clarification from the sponsor's comments. Ms. Lapahi?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's Tapahi with a T. I know everyone gets it wrong, but anyhow, just to comment first on Honorable Simonson's amendment. My understanding is that her amendment is to allocations in the big budget book. It's moving money from one object code to another object code, from one business unit to another business unit. So my understanding is that it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't impact what's written in the paragraph G, starting on page 4, the personnel lapse savings account. We can go to that now. Unfortunately, Exhibit G1 that was passed out is technically correct, but it's very confusing because it does not follow the line items in the budget legislation. I had asked OMB to provide that, but we haven't got that yet, so I plan to reconfigure this to make a new Exhibit G1 for presentation to the council tomorrow, so that the G1 follows exactly the listing, the 1 through 67 listing on pages 4 through 7 of the legislation. So the G1 that I propose to prepare will follow this, and it won't be confusing. It looks very, very different, of course, but it's technically correct. It does have all these allocations, and it has the allocations approved by the Budget and Finance Committee. It's just that OMB has their way of putting things in different categories and such, and it doesn't follow this, the wording in the legislation. So that's the reason that G1 looks so strange right now. But again, Honorable Delegate Simonson's amendment is not to the G1, anything in G1. So that's not affected by her proposed amendment. That's all I have, unless you have further questions.
Thank you, our legal counsel. Colleagues, I know there's a lot of confusion right now with G1, so as legal counsel did state and our sponsor, as amendments and the dollar amounts continue to change, G1, and also, so it's more like it's a moving document that would continuously be updated. So what we can do is have our Office of Legislative Services help you keep track too on what is on page 4. So then everybody will follow of how it's going, how it's moving forward. But the amendment on the board right here, amendment number 3, is from the big budget book. So it's not within part of the G1 of the personal lapse fund. So just for that clarification, colleagues. Chair James, does that provide clarification, or would you need additional more clarification or information on how this is being done?
I think we need more clarification, because right now it is very confusing. Because if you are saying, if from our legal advice that was provided is, if this is the accurate number, the G1 that we received during recess, you're telling me as a lawmaker that this legislation that is before us has inaccurate numbers. And we're discussing an inaccurate number legislation, and we're making amendments up here with inaccurate numbers. But yet, you come and throw this one in that we received during recess, and you are saying this is the accurate number again. And so at this point, it does not make sense to move forward. In reality, what we should have done was just table this legislation until we have accurate final numbers. Then we can start making amendments. But right now, we don't have accurate numbers. Because what's going to happen is, if this motion that is before us right now, that goes through, then we come with this G1 that we received during recess, and we're going to have to amend this to this legislation again. And that changes the whole concept of the numbers that is in G1. So tell me I'm thinking and understanding this wrong, please. If not, then let's just table it and move on. And then wait until we have accurate numbers and deal with it at council. And again, this falls back on OMB. So we really need to have accurate numbers in order to make amendments to numbers being changed around. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Chair James. So in regards to G1, Exhibit G1, I'm going to first turn the floor over to OLC, and then we're going to turn the floor over to Mr. Brial, who did update these numbers as of earlier this morning. So we'll go first to Ms. Tapahi, and then we will go to Mr. Brial to get some clarifications going before we move on with amendment number 3. Office of Legal Counsel.
I'm not on. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So to address your concern, Honorable Delegate James, just to be clear, just to clarify, this G1 that was passed out during the recess, it is technically accurate. I don't want anyone to think that OMB did not prepare this accurately. It is accurate. It reflects not only the DIB posted allocations from the personnel lapse, items 1 through 67 listed on page 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the legislation. So it lists those, but it also lists the modifications, the amendments, and a few little additions that Budget and Finance Committee approved, formally approved through amendments back on August 31st, last Thursday. So this is technically correct. The reason folks are a little confused right now, I understand it's confusing, is because if you go on those pages of the body of the legislation starting at page 4, the 1 through 67, this does not follow the 1 through 67. The numbers are there, the allocations are there, and everything's correct. It's just that it doesn't follow it. So when you read the legislation and you look at this, it looks totally different, okay? But, so for that reason, I'm recommending that I'm planning to prepare a different version of this that is easier to follow for the delegates. Now, as far as the amendment proposed by Honorable Simonson, that amendment affects the allocations in the big budget book. That amendment simply moves from one object code to another. That's all it's doing. It is not affecting any of the allocations in Exhibit G1. So the personnel lapse allocations, G1, this is totally separate from Delegate Simonson's proposed amendment. So, and in fact, all the amendments today that have been discussed and voted on and such today do not apply and do not affect Exhibit G1 because they're not amendments to the personnel lapse allocations. They're amendments to the allocations in the big budget book. So we're okay for now. In order to preserve the approved amendments that were passed today by the committee today, the legislation would have to be voted on. If we adjourn without voting on the legislation, then those amendments will not follow the legislation to council tomorrow. So just to give you advice on that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
I'm going to give some time over to Mr. Bial. Mr. Bial, the question is to Exhibit G1, and then also what is stated on page 4 of the legislation, the listing.
Madam Speaker, members of the committee, and everyone that is here with us. Here is my explanation. First of all, the legislation as dropped by the Budget and Finance Committee on August 30th. It says August 30th. Is that right? Look, it says August 30th. Then the 31st, the next day. Oh, excuse me. Okay, let me start over on that part. Legislation 0214-23, which is the legislation before you at the moment. It was dropped by B&F committee on August 25th. And so the legislation before you is still the same way as it was dropped. So when you look at page 4, and then going on to Exhibit G1, it's the same as it was when it was dropped. But what happened is on August 31st, the B&F committee came back to the legislation because the 5 days had run by then. And at that time made more amendments, including on Exhibit G1, if you look at the current attachment. For example, the first one, $5.4 million for the 23 GWA and so forth. That goes down. What it doesn't show is the business unit, and then a further more thorough explanation of the purpose, what it's used for. Now, in prior years, this Exhibit G1 would show all that. And so therefore, the way we did it, and working with Chair Parrish, the revised G1 that you're looking at now that was handed out would be the correct one, and it's in the format that we've typically used in years past. So for example, the Veterans Assistance Group is the first one in their respective business units, the amounts, and then a description of what that allocation is for. And then it has the Veterans Administration total, $215,000. The same thing going down, DHR. It lists the business unit, the program names, the amounts, and then what it's for. So that's what the various affected programs do with this information, is revise their budgets accordingly to add these new funding as authorized by BNF on the 31st. And the majority of them have done it by now, at least as of early Sunday morning. And so that's all reflected now in the big budget book. So that's what this document is. I also wanted to say that, where did I put it again? This one doesn't have it. No, I was looking for the committee report. Okay, here it is. Furthermore, members of the committee, on the legislation that is before you, again, 0214-23, you look at the back of the document is the Budget and Finance Committee's committee report. And it shows you all of the amendments that were made. There's a number of them, at least 17, in the first grouping of amendments. And then there, Amendment 2, there's more amendments. So as you were talking earlier, because the legislation itself hasn't been updated yet to show this, is that problems might come up where you're attempting to make amendments using the base information on page 4, yet it was amended by BNF. And as Ms. Tapahi mentioned, fortunately in this case the amendment before you is not affected by that. So that one is okay. But I'm afraid that as you go on, either today or later in the week, you're going to run into that difficulty. So that's the explanation. And again, in prior years, based on my experience, these new documents don't require an amendment. I think, as Parrish mentioned, Chair Parrish mentioned, in the actions of the BNF committee in their committee report, it does say that, and she referred to it, that OMB and BNF committee's advisor and legislative council will prepare these various documents and exhibits in the correct format to reflect the allocations. So that's what we've done. Now, one of the documents, G1, is now before you. H1, that needs to be handed out too, quite frankly, and I don't believe you have that yet, because if you look at the H1 in the current legislation, it's similar to the permanent fund, or excuse me, the personnel lapse version, where it also is simply a listing, 1 through 17, the amounts, and it just talks about the programs. There's no business units. There's no description of exactly what it's for. So that created the problem when all we had was this to work with. When we tried to work with, for example, the first one, 3.4 million, CPMD, Capital Projects Management. The Capital Projects Management Department, which is within DCD, they'll ask us, what is it for? Because this exhibit wasn't prepared with that information. That's why we had a hard time working on, it was on Friday, Saturday, and then we're trying to wrap up as best we could on Sunday. And finally, we got this far. And the budget, the big budget book that you now have before you was prepared accordingly to the Budget and Finance Committee's final amendments. And that's what you have before you now. And by the way, just to mention to you, this budget book wasn't finished until 10:30 last night. So, a lot of work involved. And when some of the information is lacking, you see, it's hard to do, especially on a weekend and then a holiday. So that's my overview on this particular matter. Madam Speaker, thank you. I hope I answered okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bial. Colleagues, we did recognize that point of order. Colleagues, hopefully that clarifies a lot of your questions on the amendment and also the amendment that is amendment number 3 and also the moving documents to G1. So with that, I'm going to return back to the floor. We are still on amendment number 3, colleagues. Honorable Johnson, this is to amendment number 3.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to offer an amendment to the legislation 0214-23.
Honorable Johnson, we already have an amendment on the floor that was motioned by Vice Chair Simonson.
Okay.
So we would have to vote and take action on this amendment first, and then you can come back to the floor to do another amendment. Honorable Karate, to amendment number 3.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm trying to understand the amendment. I do not see the rationale. I did provide the policies and procedures regarding the youth council. And so colleagues, if you could open up that email and look over the policies and procedures for the Navajo Nation Youth Council on page 3 of 5. There is a section in that policy relating to personnel. And so there is personnel that is identified for the Navajo Nation Youth Council, and that is the Office of the President and Vice President shall provide technical assistance to the council in relations to coordination with judicial and legislative. So there is a personnel in the Office of the President and Vice President who has been identified through this committee resolution. And so this is a HES resolution from 2017. And so with this amendment and looking at how it has changed to now from 75,000 to 97,451, when I look at this amendment, what I see is to take a position from the Office of the President and Vice President, which the policies and procedures already identify as an individual who will provide technical assistance to the council. and looking at their rate of salary, what this amendment will do is decrease this individual's salary to $43,556, and that goes against everything that this council so far has advocated for. We've advocated for higher wages, higher salaries, and now this amendment will be reducing an individual's salary to nearly half. I don't see how the fringe benefit is only $9,000 or $7,451, because fringe benefit on Navajo Nation is at 43.38%. So this is not a total allocation of the fringe benefits for this personnel position, and that can then lock up the funding in that position, because you can't hire anyone, or you have to just keep that money in the fringe benefits. So you're basically creating a system here to lock up, I don't know, who's good with numbers, 48% of 90,000. That's, I'm thinking it's almost $40,000 you're leaving on the table. So this is not a well-crafted amendment in the eyes of like a budget perspective, because you're decreasing the amount for that personnel. If we want our youth to be focused in on, then we have to be willing to pay a salary that will attract dynamic individuals here on Navajo Nation. We also have to look at making sure that the Youth Council is abiding by the policies and procedures that have been approved by the oversight on HES. You are required to get a quarterly report from the Youth Council, and that has not taken place. And so I think in looking at these technicalities of this amendment, you can't leave 40,000 plus in fringe benefit, because you're defeating the purpose. The second thing is, when the Youth Council was established, at the time, that was under the Begay-Nez administration, they pulled money from Office of Dene Youth to fund that position. I don't want to say her name because she didn't do it, but they pulled money from Office of Dene Youth for that position. So Office of the President and Vice President right now has that funding for this position. What this council and committee needs to do is keep them accountable. And that could be either through a legislative concern or a condition of appropriation. Because I don't think moving forward and in having this conversation a few weeks ago, we heard about the policies and procedures, and what this council and committee can do is then invite either the current youth council, because we've had winter session, spring session, summer session, and I didn't hear a request to hear from the youth council. So I just need to be consistent in how we're advocating. And I would definitely like to support the youth council and have a conversation with OPVP, but this amendment will tie up dollars in fringe benefit, and they have an existing position which is at a higher rate. And so I'm trying to understand the dynamic of it. So if the motioning party can provide that in an explanation, but I think at this point, we're going against everything we've said we want to do. Like providing living wage, like providing and making sure technical assistance is being provided to the youth council, like being the oversight, like looking at the expenditures of the OMB report. And so I think there's room for more conversation. So I'd like to see the legislative concern or the condition of appropriation, but I don't see it here in this amendment on how we're going to be fixing the issue other than leaving money on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty, for your comments. There were some important questions raised. I'm going to return the floor over to sponsor for amendment number 3, Vice Chair Simonson.
The condition of appropriation pertaining to personnel management, human services. So I'd like to have the floor back after this vote. Thank you.
Honorable Toth, and we will recognize you back when we are back on our main motion. Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for the healthy debate on this amendment. The way it's constructed now is not, it's not something I can continue to support, so I'm going to withdraw my second on it. The issue with the fringe benefit rate being $7,400, and for a political appointee, I think it's 51.8 or 51 something percent for a political at-will employee in the president's office. I think it should be, this should look different the way it's currently constructed. And the points that Delia Crotty raised, I think, are important. I would support a directive, a condition on appropriation, basically anything to have the president's office direct resources in accordance with the plan of operation. And I would encourage Shitsui Delegate Simonson to pursue that avenue if there's no other person who will take up the second on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Vice Chair Slater withdraws his second. Colleagues, is there another second to this motion and amendment number 3? Second call. Honorable Tlaw, you will be the seconding party. Honorable Tlaw concurs, so we do have a new second by Honorable Tlaw. And turn over to Honorable So.
She thought you had nearly so go so that Lanson. She added general added so that alliance. Couldn't Hania? Oh, could go no I appreciate the learning curve of the amendments at the budget session. Could it be no dato be moving monies around. Those are part of the learning process. And the bigger issue is the 3-branch chiefs agreement, which is not codified in law. Bez ani dobi sota. Ako di de talt ego ya big echo go ya peso nas so. Aje ye ate ado ne koje ashkeje danot ahi dit a peso han shi an bohne zanit ego peso dizo beto ni aro koje in can speaker so hot ego go hot hot ye at this ado president so the 3-branch chiefs agreement is not codified in law. And we went through a new budget process this year, which was a format of a committee meeting. It wasn't a hearing. It wasn't a hearing session to really hear the needs of the programs. And this is what this amendment here is particularly speaking to what Honorable Simonson is trying to address, the need there at the office of the NA Youth, or correction, the Youth Department, the Youth Council. This year's budget session, to me, it really did. We didn't hear the nuts and bolts from the actual program, like from the janitor or from the secretary. All we heard is from the division director and from their managers, and they painted this rosy picture. Said, oh, this is all we need, and this is where we're going to put money and things like that, and yeti, and motion second, and we voted. All the standing committees voted. Ako kade ya peso ki na kad kode nan de ni zoho. We're racing up against time. One is that I hope that there's a maybe a CR ready, continuous resolution ready to be just on the safe side as we move forth. You just don't know, because 3 years ago we ended up doing a CR because there was a disagreement at the budget session. Akoko epe koko e hot ape benash. Akonde di gadit aniki e shit ah. Hashet ash the 3-branch chiefs agreement do. Di nilzenta. Aden hinat ade ta go yebeso yes got this go. Yes, akaido di ego chudo in ni. The executive branch indicated that they're going to put monies here and there based off of their piece of the pie. Ako she oi onash ego go e ya badin sin she moda nash. Da shin tsogo ata yin ba na hatikion. They next ain't no peso di egon da do zo ni. This program, you're going to get this, you're going to get that, make that work. And through some of the budget hearings too, we found out that programs are not expending their dollars. Peso tabi alcohol. These amendments that we shuffle monies around, does this amendment really suffice the need? Inside the youth council from the budget from previous year. Just the dialogue, I hear there's budgets, monies, expenditures from 2023 budget and really not expended. That tells you that that program is not expending those dollars. Akoko open nashon what I sit be and hot o shi what up based on that so. Ako what up and hanash. Akonda as is how the legislation came forth. I do support the legislation as is. Lede ta ade be ilnigi. Ni na nike aden hinant a ta donni. Shape got it on it hit donni. Aro aden speaker each hadot. Chief Justice each hadot. Shat it ego a chance what that kind it up got that it the donni. Aro and that Ranji could obey Lada sit Leon. There doesn't take his pen out. Ben back at chair, she or tickle, iki dozo. Iki is zogo aro tetnaja, not all daro, nihi could yadan tehi ajin hits iki dozo. Beso tahi dot. Echo a she a bass kitchen and bana sockis. Near Nahot in later. The quick or she. A conda aj a did Nishanant and Lenny Hayato da in niche. The short echo the Nahashi are there. She here had no idea he started in the hands town could all confirm a date ya. Oh, she could all large at sea slid or lifty could die in Nishiki. Diego Banasa, Idodi, Ego, East Kata Nego, egg a base on days. Ako ben nash go. E be ya yan seta kiss or hard la beso chito in he one at the yizo. Doshin, I don't know what this kezo do what are yali in days zota. Ako oh what up in Hanash insurance Ako didn't lay there be could all بيشمع أن بتأنس نلقي بيسو كديز إيجي آدي بيكيه نيجي كوي لاجي بيسو سابع تنهدي آهي إيه دين دات ديل تصشن عشان أوه أبين خنش خالا إيه شيء لو كدو داشين سقو لو يجو بيشمع أني تلني بانداني كيو لو بالنهار تخانو بالنهار تخاغو أخو الجيش أخو قديتو ماي ليد دي إنترنت ليد الصوني ليد نلجنن ليد ديت إيقون جنوش كيندو نلخاتنو هاشي ناتش أهو ماي هنا الوت ماي آجي شاش كيشه نيدي تصوزو يا يغز إيبك أهون ليد الصون تي بيبك أهون نش إيقو وطأ and as an analogy بتلخانا نلو او به ياجي غزنا لو اجي وطأ باتكي ناني كي هجوبا نهاتكي وطأ شنان آنو خنيجي كجي بيسبوك إذا دستو إنكي تو كجي أتسيستو ألتخا بسن كسدو إنكي دون دا كجي ناتلوشي دون دا كجي نشنا غالب كسدو إن دون دا سلاو دون دي كويلتيم كسدو إنكي إيه كده يجو خد شنان أكو أن ليد بيش قديت أني إيه خد إيجو إيه يا بي نخنش إيدو آيات إيه أكو إيدو نهتك إنتا دو نهتك يستا تو خيدة تا آدي إن آدي إيه يا يالجي تو يك خديت أرساني هجيس آدا خالي آدي بيسو بيك أقول لاي ببرانش شيف ليني إيك ديت إيجو نيدون نجاي خيت بيسو شيوخ أكو إيه بي أو أبين خنش بي خنيج أحديث أكو إيه بي أكو بي هتشناهي I'm going to table this legislation. So that's going to be my motion, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable So. There is a motion on the floor, a motion to
30
table.
days? Yeah.
Can you give a time frame, Honorable So?
Can you guys give me a time frame that will be suitable? Because we know that council's tomorrow. And tomorrow, if you're going to bring this amendment back, you can bring it back at council. The time frame. Tomorrow we hit council session. The time frame. But it's meeting the timeline, and let's go ahead and try to tomorrow, 8 in the morning, 8 o'clock, or $8 o'clock in the morning.
Colleagues, there is a motion to table the legislation to 8 o'clock in the morning, so that would. Honorable So, regarding to your time frame to tomorrow, 8 a.m., we do have that 24-hour notice, meeting notice for Naa'bik'iyati. So I believe we are past that time frame. Honorable So.
Let's go to where we meet that 24-hour notice, because basically what's going to happen is, even though we don't get to it, this legislation moves forward, because NABI is not the final authority on this particular legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable So. Just to go over the 24-hour of notice, Ms. Cook, can you give us a legitimate time frame, because we do have an agenda out for council as well for tomorrow. So just for
Madam Speaker, the 24-hour time frame is needed to, just based on what is listed in the standing rules of order and then the Title II as well. You cannot table this legislation past today. It has to be, if it is tabled today, it be to later on this evening, but it expires at midnight because tomorrow is council. Madam Speaker.
Honorable So we did get that recommendation from Office of Legislative Services. Honorable So.
I'm going to withdraw my motion then, since I don't but basically, I'm just looking at the timeline. Because the main council Thursday and Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have to finish it by then. Thank you very much.
Honorable So withdraws his motion to table. Colleagues, I'm going to turn the floor back over to sponsor of amendment number 3, Vice Chair Simonson.
Oh, thank you, Speaker Curley. So we did talk about it here with Ms. Tapaha, and I'm going to go ahead and withdraw my motion. We're going to fix it with OMB tonight, and I'll come back tomorrow with an amendment during council.
There is withdrawal of amendment number 3. Second does concur. So colleagues, we are back on the main motion. Just give us a few seconds to update the request to speak and see. Back on the main motion. Okay, Vice Chair Johnson, back on the main motion.
Yeah, Speaker Curley. Just want to thank all my honorable colleagues, legislative staff for being here and maintaining quorum. Okay, I'd like to add an amendment to the legislation 0214-23. This was emailed out to all the 25th Navajo Nation Council.
Vice Chair Johnson, there is a motion for amendment number 3. I'm going to have staff read that amendment number 3 into the record first before I recognize the second.
Amendment number 3, sponsored by Delegate Casey Allen Johnson. Amend Exhibit J, page 1 as follows. Legislative concerns for FY 2024 related to the following Navajo Nation divisions, departments, and programs. All divisions, departments, programs. 3, new language underline, for all divisions, departments, and programs to provide a written report to the Budget and Finance Committee regarding use of the FMIS 6B electronic process by the end of first quarter of FY 2024. The written report shall provide information as to the number of times the FMIS 6B was used, whether the use of the FMIS 6B process was used as soon as the need to purchase was determined, whether the division, department, or program is consistently using the FMIS 6B, and whether there are difficulties in the use of the FMIS 6B. Use of the FMIS 6B on a consistent basis will lessen the time it takes to complete order requisitions and to make payments on those requisitions. 2, amend Exhibit J, page 6, by adding the following language at the end of the page. 1, Office of the Controller. The Office of the Controller shall identify Navajo Nation financial policies and procedures that are duplicative, cumbersome, or otherwise prevent the purchase and payment of items and services in a timely manner. The financial policies and procedures that need amendment should be presented to the Budget and Finance Committee as a report by the end of first quarter of FY 2024. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for reading amendment number 3 into the record. Colleagues, is there a second? Second by Honorable Crotty. Colleagues, are there any questions or comments on amendment number 3? Second call. Oh, Honorable Crotty on amendment number 3.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shadeja. So it looks like H1 exhibit is ready for the technical. So I'm going to ask the motioning party if we could add it as a modification, and as a seconding party, I'll agree to it. Thank you.
So there is a request for modification. Ms. Cook, could you read that into the record first, and then we will go to the sponsor of amendment number 3.
Okay, amendment. In Exhibit H1, add the following to item 11 for Daltex. The $5,177,917 will be allocated as follows. Business Unit Number 113010, Daltex Administration, $177,917. Business Unit Number 113011, Chinle Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113012, Fort Defiance Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113013, Crown Point Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113014, Tuba City Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113015, Shiprock Agency, $1 million. 2, the Office of Management and Budget shall work with the Budget and Finance Committee Advisor and the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare revised and corrected exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the amended allocations approved herein. 3, renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this legislation and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendments. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for reading that modification. I'm going to turn the floor over to our sponsor of amendment number 3, if he does concur, if he does accept that modification. Vice Chair Johnson?
I concur.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson. Colleagues, we do have that modification here on the board. Colleagues, are there any additional questions or comments to the amendment? Second call. Third call. Colleagues, we'll go for a vote on amendment number 3. You have 2 minutes to vote. Twenty more seconds. Two minutes is up. Colleagues, we have a vote of 16 in favor, 0 opposed, with chair not voting. Amendment number 3 carries forward. Colleagues, we are back on the main motion. Honorable Toth.
Madam Chair, aro koro bispas an Naa'bik'iyati budget asing without be data. Alles adon nilta oinzino jo Naa'bik'iyati ko yati. Repetition che. Citos. Anyway, the Department of Personnel Management Hashin Suko alleged it and that all what he say kokoro condition appropriation to pertaining to hiring individual employees. I believe the amendment to this is 0241. I mean 021423. I believe the staff has that. Can staff read into this record? I mean, this condition of appropriation for us, so we can vote on Koron Hinch Kato second shot of leave. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Toth. There is a motion on the floor. Just give us a few seconds for our staff to look up that email so we can read that into the record. Ms. Cook, could you help us read that into the record, and then we can recognize a second?
Amendment to Legislation 0214-23, adding a COA to Exhibit 4 DPM. 1, add the following conditions of appropriations to Exhibit 1. Department of Personnel Management, DPM. The Navajo Nation Council is concerned about delays in hiring Navajo Nation employees, applicants being told they're not qualified, it takes too long for positions to be advertised, etc. Millions of dollars are being returned to funding sources because DPM takes too long to approve positions and process hiring documents. When programs select individuals, it takes a long time for the personnel action forms to get processed, hence delaying the employee's payroll. Sometimes the selected applicant decides to accept another job. DPM complains that they do not have sufficient staff. DPM has too much authority which should be exercised by programs. DPM should be a processing office only. 1, in light of the above concern, by the end of third quarter FY 2024, DPM shall relinquish its authorities to divisions, departments, and programs as follows. Qualification assessments. DPM authority to determine qualification for applicants for positions shall be determined by division directors, department program supervisors, and managers. DPM shall create an applicant pool of those not selected and facilitate the process for hiring individuals. Salary assessments. Divisions, programs, departments know their budgets. Therefore, directors, supervisors, and managers of divisions, departments, programs shall have the authority to negotiate and determine how much to pay individuals they are hiring. Position classifications and reclassification. Programs shall have the authority to decide what programs are needed in the programs as well as reclassifying positions. By October 31st, 2023, DPM shall present an amended Navajo Nation Personnel Policies Manual to the Budget and Finance Committee. The Office of Legislative Counsel is authorized and directed to prepare a revised and corrected Exhibit I as necessary and appropriate to reflect the committee's final approved amended Exhibit I. Renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this act and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendments. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for reading that amendment into the record. I believe that's amendment number 4. Colleagues, is there a second? Second by Honorable Jesus. Honorable Karate to the amendment.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shadeja. Appreciate this amendment. Shiaj Delegate Toth. In reading the amendment, I'm not sure, so this question would be to Legislative Counsel. I'm trying to tease out what exactly is the condition of appropriation because there's not a business unit that has been identified to connect it to an appropriation. And in looking at number 1, by the end of third quarter, so this is more of a directive, shall relinquish its authority to divisions, departments, and programs. This sounds like a change in plan of operation that needs oversight committee's involvement. So what is the condition of appropriation? What business unit is impacted? And what then will happen? What is the condition So what will happen if this does not transpire within the time frame that the amending party is identifying? And I'm asking because the amending party is part of the oversight. So the program cannot implement these changes without formal legislative action from the oversight. So are we including the oversight in this condition of appropriation? That would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty. We can turn the floor over to Ms. Tapahi, to our Office of Legal Counsel, Ms. Tapahi, to Honorable Crotty's question.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Honorable Delegate Crotty. I drafted this as close as possible to what Honorable Delegate Toth presented to me. This is his requested amendment. I do understand that there needs to be a actual consequence attached to this, and there should also be a business unit number. I can assist in trying to find the business unit number, but I think I would defer to OMB for that, and I also can assist if I'm given guidance as to what the consequence should be. That's a policy decision, not necessarily a legal decision. So that's my answer at this point, and unless you have further questions. Another recommendation would be this could be placed under the legislative concerns as is, without changing any of the language. But again, that's up to you all. That's not necessarily a legal issue.
Thank you, Ms. Tapahi. I'm going to turn the floor over back to our sponsor first for any type of comments. Kodo Shiche, Honorable Toth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, Ms. Crowdy, though, attorney, I think it'd be a concern. And also, this should be also referred back to the HASI committee. So it'll be a condition of concern, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Tolshiche, just for a clarification for our colleagues here. So you're modifying your amendment to put as a legislative concern instead of a COA.
Madam Chair, that's what I meant to say. Amendment sheet modified this, and also it says to you by October 31st shall be presented to the personnel and also to the HASI committee. It'll modify this, Madam Chair. Thank you. Huh?
Goshisha Shiche, we modified that language, so it'll be a legislative concern, and then on point number 2, it'll read by October 31st, 2023, DPM shall present an amended Navajo Nation Personnel Policies Manual to the HESI committee. Hakoshi. Seconding party, Honorable Jesus, do you concur with that modification? Honorable Jesus concurs. Colleagues, we do have the modification here on the board. We'll go back to the floor for amendment number 4. Honorable Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. I was just going to raise the issue about it going to Hess instead of Budget and Finance, so that's satisfied now.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. Colleagues, are there any more questions to amendment number 4? Second call,
Turn me off.
Honorable Crotty.
Oh, yeah, Shadija. Delegate Toth, I have another question regarding number 1. After it says the third quarter fiscal year 2024, DPM shall relinquish its authorities to divisions. That can only be done through a legislative action. I just need clarification on the intent of that language. I know we have chair and vice chair of the oversight. I'm not sure if those conversations are happening. I don't see in a legislative concern how a program shall relinquish any of its authorities. Or help me understand that, Xiaj. Thank you.
Goshi Honorable Crotty. Other Honorable Toth that kid is to point number 1. That whole section right there that has 4 bullet points. Asian Kwaiki Yan this kid. Honorable Toth.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Answer Honorable Crowdy's questions. So I need the guidance from legal counsel, not fully take that authority away. I just want them to hear a concern that we need to have this whole personnel policy to be understandable. I need a guidance from legislative counsel.
Thank you, Honorable Toth. He did request for guidance from Office of Legal Counsel. Ms. Tapahi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Honorable Delegate Toth. I recommend that the word shall be changed in this amendment, wherever it appears, changed to the word should. And that's more in line with all the other legislative concerns. They all say should rather than shall. That's my advice.
Honorable Toth.
Madam Speaker, thank you.
Hakoshi, there is that modification to change shall to should. And we will cross out shall in each of where it appears. Just give us a minute or so to update that here on the board.
Shall prepare legislation. Okay, may I speak?
Kuro Shiche, Honorable Toth, Shkotek,
Madam Speaker, Hotebiga. Thank you.
Koshi, second party, Honorable Jesus. Honorable Jesus concurs. Colleagues, we do have that modification here on the board. Are there any additional comments or questions? Second call. Yes, no? Okay. So we have our Office of Legal Counsel who has, since we did change it from a COA to a legislative concern, I'm going to give some time to Ms. Tapahi, who did draft the language for you, Honorable Toth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I should have added the following sentence to my recommendation. In addition to changing shall to should, a sentence should be added into that item number 1 there where it says, in light of the above concerns, by the end of third quarter FY 2024, DPM should present a revised plan of operation for presentation to its oversight committee for relinquishing its authorities. That would be inserted there in the first statement there for DPM.
Thank you, Ms. Tapahi. Colleagues, I'm going to turn the floor over back to Honorable Toth. Honorable Toth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, Shanat Anil, recommendation by our attorney too also, she's going to fix that. So I would like to withdraw until she said it's going to take like 15 minutes to redo this for us, and then I can have the floor again. Okay, I'd like to withdraw this condition of concerns, legislative concern. Thank you.
Honorable Toth withdraws amendment number 4. Colleagues, we are back on our main motion. We have Chair Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, colleagues. Speaker, I do have an amendment to the budget, and I did approve it. So if you guys, Ms. Tapaha, if you could send out that amendment, it is to take $3 million from the Housing Trust Fund and put that into the fund for the school clothing program. As was stated, we have 15,000 families that are in need of the clothing program. And as was stated by the director, many of these families were approved for the clothing program, and then they were later sent a letter saying that funds ran out. The director did state on the record that if he started with a clean slate, that he would be able to, this next budget, take responsibility of that budget and ensure that this doesn't happen again. But the bottom line is we do have it within the unmet needs document that was presented to us. On page 4 of 6, there was also a HES recommendation, HEHSCAU-10-23 for business unit number 117008, the school clothing program, $3 million. The school clothing program provides financial benefit for school-aged Navajo children to purchase school clothing and supplies for their choice, to promote school attendance, encourage academic performance, and support self-confidence. Fiscal year 23, over 20,000 applications. I guess I'm saying it might have been received, but there's a typo, but it says, and we were unable to serve all students. Additional funds requested to serve 15,000 students at $200 per student. $3 million. And I think every single one of us here on this council can remember a time when our parents couldn't afford clothes. And we were not excited to go to school because, as we know, sometimes kids can be mean to each other. And that even means them being mean because of the clothes that you're wearing, or because maybe your clothes are ripped, and it just doesn't make school fun anymore. But what I worry about is that 15,000 students requested for clothing, and only 5,000 were approved, but we don't know the number of how many more were approved where they ran out of funding. So I'm hoping that this $3 million, colleagues, that will vote, and I did talk to Chair Parrish about that, because I know what she was trying to do with the Housing Trust Fund, and she's okay with that, because at this point, that's the only place that we can take funding from to balance out that 15,000. And then hopefully next budget, we won't see the school clothing program at $3 million need, because they approved applications that were submitted to them by our Navajo families and the children. So I hope I have your support on this. I believe that Ms. Tapaha is sending out the amendment if you haven't already received it. But again, it's taking from the Housing Trust Fund and putting the $3 million into the school clothing program. Thank you, Speaker. That's my amendment.
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton. Before I recognize a second, I'll have Ms. Cook read that amendment number 4 into the record.
Amendment to legislation number 2014-23 regarding unmet needs for school clothing program. On page 8 at line 6 in item number 17, make the following change. Strike through 5 million, underline bold, new amount 2 million. On page 8 after line 7, insert the following new item number 18. 18 underline 3 million for the Navajo Division of Social Services for the Navajo School Clothing Program. The Office of Management Budget shall work with the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare revised and corrected exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the committee's final approved amended allocations. Renumber or reletter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this act and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendment. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Colleagues, do we have a second for amendment number 4? Second by Honorable Jesus. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments on amendment number 4? Second call. Third call. 2 minutes to vote, colleagues, on amendment number 4. We have 30 seconds on the board, colleagues. We have a vote of 16 in favor, 0 opposed, with chair not voting. Amendment number 4 does carry. Colleagues, we are back on the main motion. Are there any other comments or questions? Second call. Third call. Staff, could we have our second reading before we go to a vote?
Amendment number 1 is to add big budget book Exhibit K. My apologies. Replace the Exhibit K page with the detailed budget book titled The Navajo Nation Fiscal Year 2024 Comprehensive Budget, prepared by the Office of Management and Budget and provided to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee on September 5th, 2023, which book is hereby designated Exhibit K. The Office of Management and Budget shall work with the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare, revise, and corrected exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the committee's final approved amended allocations in the big budget book and other exhibits. Re-letter, renumber succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this act and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language in any other amendments. Amendment 2, legislative concern. The Department of Justice shall, by the end of the first quarter, present a written and oral report to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee detailing how it will comply with the guidelines to Executive Order Number 06-2023, which requires 164 reviews to be completed within 5 working days of submission. Furthermore, the Department of Justice shall present written and oral reports to the Naa'bik'iyati Committee at the end of the second and third quarters on its progress in adhering to the required timeframes. Amendment number 3. Amend Exhibit J, page 1 as follows. Legislative concerns for FY 2024 related to the following Navajo Nation divisions, departments, and programs. All divisions, departments, programs. 3, underline. For all divisions, departments, and programs to provide a written report to the Budget and Finance Committee regarding use of the FMIS 6B electronic process by the end of first quarter of FY 2024. The written report shall provide information as to the number of times the FMIS 6B was used, whether the use of this FMIS 6B process was used as soon as the need to purchase was determined, whether the division, department, or program is consistently using the FMIS 6B, and whether there are difficulties in the use of the FMIS 6B. Use of FMIS 6B on a consistent basis will lessen the time it takes to complete order requisitions and to make payments on those requisitions. 2, amend Exhibit J, page 6, by adding the following language at the end of the page. Bold, underline, Office of the Controller. 1, the Office of the Controller should identify Navajo Nation financial policies and procedures that are duplicative, cumbersome, or otherwise prevent the purchase and payment of items and services in a timely manner. The financial policies and procedures that need amendments should be presented to the Budget and Finance Committee as a report by the end of first quarter of FY 2024. In Exhibit H1, add the following item 11 for Daltex. The $5,177,917 will be allocated as follows. Business Unit Number 113010, Daltex Administration, $177,917. Business Unit Number 113011, Chindley Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113012, Fort Defiance Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113013, Crown Point Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113014, Tuba City Agency, $1 million. Business Unit Number 113015, Shiprock Agency, $1 million. The Office of Management Budget shall work with the Budget and Finance Committee Advisor and the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare revised and corrected exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the amended allocations approved herein. Renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Counsel and the Office of Legislative Services are authorized to make technical edits to this legislation and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language and any other amendments. Amendment number 4, regarding unmet needs for school clothing program. On page 8 of line 6 in item number 17, make the following change. Strike through 5 million, underline bold 2 million. On page 8, after line 7, insert the following new item number 18. 18, underline 3 million for the Navajo Division of Social Services for the Navajo School Clothing Program. The Office of Management Budget shall work with the Office of Legislative Counsel to prepare, revise, and correct the exhibits as necessary and appropriate to reflect the committee's final approve amended allocations. Renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraphs, sections, and exhibits as necessary and appropriate. The Office of Legislative Services and the Office of Legislative Counsel are authorized to make technical edits to this act and its exhibits to implement the committee's intent. This amendment supersedes inconsistent language and any other amendments. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for that second reading of our legislation. Colleagues, 2 minutes on the board. We have 20 seconds more on the board, colleagues. Honorable Jesus votes green. Honorable Damon. Time did go out. Honorable Damon votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nance votes green. Honorable Simpson, Honorable Azarette. Colleagues, we have a vote of 18 in favor, 0 opposed, with chair not voting. The legislation moves forward to Navajo Nation Council. Honorable Damon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. At this time, it is 7:10 p.m. I'd like to motion to adjourn.
There's a second by Honorable Norman Begay. Colleagues, any question, comments, objections to adjournment? Colleagues, go to the board. I don't see any objections. 2 minutes to vote on adjournment.
All right, Jay, come on. Are you going to be out in Gallup tomorrow night? We'll go eat at the casino tomorrow night. Yeah, okay. You already ate tonight. You already ate tonight. I gotta go pick up my granddaughter. We'll see you guys.
One more minute on the board, colleagues. Honorable Claw, Honorable Jesus, Honorable Parrish votes green, Honorable Yazzie, Honorable Crotty, Honorable Helena Naa'bik'iyati, Honorable Damon, Honorable Crotty. Honorable Crotty votes green. Honorable Damon. Honorable Damon votes green. Honorable Dr. Andy Nez, green. Colleagues, that's a vote of 18 in favor, 0 opposed, with chair not voting. And we adjourn at 7:14 p.m.